Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Katie if you're new, and I'm excited about today's video, which is on ghosting and what makes it so mean and why we do it even though it is so mean. If you've ever been ghosted, I'm sure you know that it's not fun, and if you've ever been the person doing the ghosting, which by the way is actually most people, just in case you're feeling super bad about it, I'm sure you had your reasons for doing it. Anyway, let's talk about it. So to start with, we should probably describe what ghosting is just in case you don't know. In a dating context, ghosting generally refers to a way of ending a relationship where you essentially just disappear. You stop replying to their messages, you stop taking their calls, you basically cut them off with no contact, no explanation. Essentially, you become a ghost. In most cases, this tends to happen earlier on in the relationship, maybe after a few dates, or maybe it's someone you've hooked up with one time, or maybe you've never even got to the stage of meeting this person, you've just been chatting with them online and then they disappear. But it also can happen in longer term relationships, which I'm not gonna lie, sounds kind of like the stuff of nightmares to me. Yeah, being ghosted by someone you're not overly committed to is always gonna suck, but for it to come from someone you care about and who you think cares about you a lot, that's kind of horrifying. But anyway, the goal of ghosting is generally to end the relationship without having to have the uncomfortable conversation about why you want it to end. Instead, you're just kind of hoping that they'll eventually get the hint and move on with their lives and everyone will end up happy. I think that a lot of chronic ghosters like to convince themselves that they're doing it for the other person's sake because they feel like it would hurt the other person's feelings to get outright rejected. But in all honesty, it is definitely more of a self-protective mechanism and a way to avoid feeling discomfort. And because you've convinced yourself that this is saving them the pain of rejection, like you don't even have to experience the guilt that you would feel if you admitted to yourself the negative impact that you might be having. There's been like a lot of research lately looking at the outcomes of being ghosted compared to being outright rejected. A lot of the time, being ghosted actually is a lot worse for people than pretty much any other kind of rejection or way of ending the relationship. So what is it about being ghosted that actually sucks so bad and hurts so much? I think the biggest and most obvious one is just the confusion and the lack of closure and the inability to get any sort of answer about what happened and what went wrong. So basically you come up with your own little theories and conclusions about what went wrong, and given the fact that you cannot fact check any of these with the other person, you kind of just have to end up accepting that one or more of them are true. So for some people this might mean they could conclude that they didn't want you because you suck and also are ugly. Some might think that they've found someone else that's way hotter and cooler and better than you that you could never compete with. You might decide that maybe they just weren't feeling it and it actually had nothing at all to do with you. But also maybe you did something super weird and super cringe and now they hate you and you should never leave your house again. Maybe they've gone on a meditation retreat without their phone and you should just keep on texting them until they get back. Maybe they died. Maybe you died. Whatever, the point is that you never get to know. And I think that's obviously going to be stressful, especially if you are someone who already struggles with anxiety issues or any kind of difficulty coping with uncertainty. Like I feel like I don't have to explain why this would suck and feel bad for a lot of people. It's stressful, it's confusing, it might mess with your self-esteem and your ability to trust people in the future, and overall it's just not a fun time for you. Another reason that I feel like ghosting sucks that doesn't get talked about as much is the fact that it means that there's this missed opportunity to have a healthy conversation and talk about your feelings. I think that this is bad in both the short term and the long term. Like in the short term, there's the fact that you don't get to disclose how you're feeling, whether you're the ghostee or the ghoster, and instead you just have to hold your feelings and your thoughts in. And I think everyone knows that expressing your feelings is healthy and good for you, and keeping them to yourself is unhealthy and not good for you. It maybe messes up your cortisol or something, if I had to guess, probably, but do not believe me about anything because I could be entirely wrong. But then also in the longer term, you have all of these screwed up communication skills because you never learned how to have a healthy conversation with people. And eventually you are going to be forced into a situation where you do have to have an uncomfortable conversation with someone. And it's going to suck even worse because you are so used to having this protective mechanism where you just disappear instead, which you can't do in a lot of situations. Like when the IRD comes to ask why you've been committing tax fraud, or when your parents ask why you don't have a real job, or a relationship or anything of value going on in your life whatsoever. But I think my point here is life is always going to involve having difficult conversations, and the best way to learn how to handle these conversations is literally just to have them. So when you ghost someone, you deprive yourself and the other person the opportunity to work on these communication skills and have those conversations. The next reason that I think being ghosted sucks so bad is that it feels so embarrassing, or at least I am assuming it does. I can't remember if I've ever been ghosted because I'm generally not paying that much attention, but if you have ever ghosted me, please let me know so I can be embarrassed about it. Anyway, I just feel like it would be so embarrassing to send a message to someone as usual and then they don't reply, so you send them another message as usual, not realizing that they are literally just waiting for you to stop and give up. Wow, I am giving myself secondhand embarrassment imagining this right now. I am going to throw up. I actually don't know if this would be bad for you. Maybe a little dose of embarrassment every now and then is healthy for you. But either way, it does not feel good to think about. So I assume it doesn't feel good to happen. I think that this is why I literally never in my life will message anyone first, because I'm so scared that I might message them and they have secretly decided to hate me without letting me know. And then I'm just gonna be embarrassed and cry. That's actually a question I have. Does never messaging someone first count as ghosting? Like if I'm not actively trying to not talk to you, but it's just the fact that I'm not gonna message you first, let me know if you would count that as ghosting, because I wouldn't. But that also might just be because it's me that's doing it. But my point though, we get my point, right? Alright, so what we've covered so far is that ghosting sucks, yes? And then on top of that, once you've been ghosted by someone, you are way more likely to ghost someone else in the future. So you end up being a part of this toxic little ghost cycle where more and more people are just getting more and more fucked up and hurt, and it's all just quite grim and a little bit sad. So if ghosting sucks so bad, why do so many people do it? Like, why is it such a common thing to do? Let's talk about psychology. No, let's talk about society. It is time. I'm gonna talk about Tinder and dating apps, as I tend to do. Dating apps make ghosting so much easier than it has ever been before. And honestly, they also make ghosting seem like the most natural option for stopping talking to someone. For one thing, I think dating apps take the whole sense of humanity and personness out of getting to know someone romantically, because they're basically just a profile. So this removes a lot of the feelings of empathy and feeling like you should be treating someone decently when you're ending things with them. I feel like the phone screen or whatever puts up a huge barrier between you and the other person and basically just lets you remove yourself from the consequences of your own actions. You don't really get the sense of how what you are doing is going to affect other people, because they are closer to being hypothetical little concepts inside your phone than they are to being real actual people. There's also the fact that dating apps make it seem like you have so many options. So it might seem like a waste of time to bother explaining to one person why you don't want to keep getting to know them when there's 800 other people that you could be investing the time and the energy that this conversation would have used into instead. I also think that online dating moves at such a rapid pace. Like, it's all going so fast, the whole process of matching and getting to know each other. So the whole slow relationship building, getting to know each other stage just doesn't really happen anymore. And the whole thing is kind of just about efficiency and finding whatever it is that you are looking for as quickly and accurately as possible. So if you want to put in minimal time and minimal effort, ghosting is quite clearly a very efficient way of not having to use up any time or effort. On top of that, I think it makes it kind of easy to convince yourself that the other person won't be hugely upset about being ghosted or won't really notice it, maybe because you assume that they've got all these other options as well. So you're just one person that they probably weren't even that invested in anyway, so being ghosted by you doesn't make a difference. Which I guess might be true for some, or maybe even most people, but that is a huge assumption to be making about all people on dating apps. But also, congrats on not being a narcissist who assumes that everyone you talk to is in love with you and is going to be devastated by your loss. Moving on though, my favorite topic now. In addition to dating apps, the whole hookup culture in general is also probably contributing to why we ghost people, because it's normalized treating people as disposable. They are literally just objects to us, or side characters in our little story. And apparently side characters don't have needs or feelings or suffer any consequences based on how we act or how we treat them. I also feel like hookup culture has come along with this idea that feelings are cringe and getting attached to someone is embarrassing, and that it's cool to not care about people, which means that maybe you see outright discussing your feelings with someone as being overly emotional and ghosting being like the chill option. Also, it might mean that maybe the other person hasn't wanted to express a huge amount of emotions to you while you've been getting to know each other, so maybe you've convinced yourself that that means that they don't feel anything and they won't care if you ghost them. Also, and I don't actually know what to call this point, but there's the whole I don't owe anyone else anything mindset that's gotten really big on the internet over the last few years. Basically, the people who think that any kind of basic decency equates to emotional labor and that no one should ever have to do it, which technically is true. You don't have to do it, but just because you don't have to doesn't mean it doesn't suck when you make that choice. I just think that there is a difference between prioritizing your own needs when necessary and being outright selfish at someone else's expense. Also, this does feel like the right place to make the point that if you are ghosting someone because they are abusive, or it just doesn't feel safe for you to have a conversation with them about why you want to end things, that's an entirely different situation from what I'm generally talking about in this video. And personally, in these cases, I think it is completely valid to make that choice and put your own need to keep yourself safe above the other person's need to not be ghosted. But generally, people are ghosting just because they're not interested anymore and they don't want to have to explain that to the other person, and I guess they've decided that they don't owe anyone anything at the expense of a few minutes of their own comfort. There are also a whole bunch of personality traits that are associated with being more likely to ghost someone. All these studies have started looking at it, and honestly I could do a whole video about some of these if people wanted me to. Obviously a big one of these is your attachment style. If you're more avoidantly attached and you're less comfortable with being close to people and having conversations about your feelings or other people's feelings, then you're also probably less interested in hearing about other people's feelings when you're dumping them. So ghosting for these people might be a way of just avoiding emotions altogether, but it also might be a means of self-sabotage where you want to end the relationship for whatever avoidance reasons you have. Maybe it's starting to feel too close or too intense for you, and you don't want to risk having a conversation with them about this and them asking you why you're ending things and you having to explain your commitment issues to them, and maybe they're like, oh, that's okay, we can work on this together, like I want to be there for you and help you and support you in this, and then everything just feels awkward and way worse for you, and ghosting is just a way to avoid that whole mess. Another one of the kind of personality traits associated with being more likely to ghost are the people who have a fixed or a destiny or a soulmate mindset when it comes to relationships, where essentially they think people either are or are not meant to be together, as opposed to having a growth mindset where you believe that relationships inherently involve working together to grow and resolve issues together as a couple. If you have this fixed or destiny mindset, you are way more likely to ghost someone, both in the early stages of the relationship as well as further into the relationship. And that might just be because you think it is a waste of time and energy to communicate your issues to someone who you've decided just clearly isn't your soulmate and it's just not meant to be. Also, these people tend to have a lot more short-term relationships than people who have growth beliefs, which maybe this is just me, but it seems counterintuitive to me. And also, by the way, this is what I'm writing my honours thesis on, so I could talk about this for a very long time, but I'm not going to do that to you all. Just know that I could. I have got to stop talking right now. This video feels so long, but I've honestly had so much fun talking about this. I got super into ghosting at the start of this year, and honestly I just love to have a little chat about these things. I'm going to do a video soon on how to cope with being ghosted, so if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe and hang around for that one coming soon. Also, if you've ever been ghosted, please leave me a comment down below and I will give you the worst, free, completely unqualified therapy of your life. And also, if you've ever been the ghoster, leave a comment about that as well and I will ignore you for several months and then come back into your life when I feel like you're finally happy and starting to move on. Anyway, like the video, subscribe to my channel. That's it from me. Kiss kiss.